All right, this is Senate Appropriations Committee. We're going through FY26 budget proposals. And today is February 6th. We're going to hear from the Department of Libraries. So if you introduce yourself for the record, and we'll introduce ourselves, even though we're not all here. Those that are here will introduce themselves.
Yes, we will.
My name is Catherine Delnau. I'm the state librarian and the commissioner of the Department of Libraries. And I appreciate being brought in today to share about the budget and to answer any questions you have.
And do you want to introduce anybody else?
I would love to introduce our two state librarians. Jeanette Schaefer is here and Tom McMurdo is here. And I have two colleagues from finance who are here today, Holly and Harley. It's hard for me to say their two names in quick succession. Holly Vermont and Harley Oliver.
Okay, great.
Great, and I'm Pat Brennan. I represent Grand Isle County.
Jenny Lyons representing Chittenden Southeast.
Andrew Perks representing Washington District.
Bob Norris representing Franklin County and the town of Elburg in Grand Isle County.
And Watson, Washington District. It's very nice to see you all, and thank you for having me here today. With your approval, I can begin just by sharing some context about the Department of Libraries and the work that we do before answering questions about our budget. Does that sound like a good plan? Great. So the Department of Libraries is within the Agency of Administration. We serve all three branches of state government, as well as libraries statewide, particularly focusing on public libraries statewide. And we have some services that we provide directly to all Vermonters. The statewide services that we provide for everyone include access to the Vermont Online Library. That is an online service through which Vermonters can access reliable, vetted information, including full-text magazines, books, medical information, even car repair manuals. And those shared online resources include a new resource called Udemy, which has more than 20,000 instructional videos and classes that support lifelong learning, but also support workforce development. And we know from colleagues in the state that some of those video courses are really helpful to them in their work, building skills. We also provide Vermonters with access to Peterson's career and test prep learning platform, and those online resources together are all really used most heavily by schools and academic institutions in the state. So if those resources were not available, each school or academic institution and each public library would need to individually contract for those services. So there's a general cost savings to that by having us do it. And we fund the online resources with a combination of general funds and also with federal funds, which we receive annually from the Institute of Museum and Library Services Grants to States program. Another key service that those two sources fund is our interlibrary loan system. So if you've ever been to a library and they didn't have the book you wanted that day, or they just didn't have it in their collection, you might have felt frustrated until you realized that you could borrow it from another library in the state, the country, or even the world. And what our department does is we facilitate a system, a courier system that moves materials between 141 libraries in the state. And that service is really very popular. Last year, we moved close to 67,000 books around the state of Vermont and from other states to Vermont. So we, again, use a combination of general and federal funds from the Institute of Museum and Library Services to both support the courier, to fund the courier program itself, the vendor that we contract with, and then also we grant funds to public libraries to offset their local costs. So we pay for half of one stop on the courier network for those 141 libraries if they apply for the grant funds. We also provide free access to Vermonters to a digital book collection called the Palace Project app, and through that resource, we provide a core collection of perpetual license items. These are ebooks and e-audiobooks. And so then local libraries can use their local dollars to focus their energy on purchasing, their energy and resources on purchasing popular titles. We also provide a direct service through our ABLE library to blind and print disabled Vermonters Since the 70s, we've been a network library of the National Library Service, which is run through the Library of Congress. And we also work with the Perkins Library in Massachusetts to get Braille books. And Vermonters have access through these services to a vast collection of ebooks, e-audio books, and specialized equipment such as Braille readers and also an audio player that is specific to that service. We also are responsible through statute for providing resources to the incarcerated people in our 6 state correctional facilities, and we provide reading materials for patients of the state's psychiatric facilities and those who are using the Veterans Home. A key thing that we do through the department is that we have 7 library consultants, and those are folks who have master's degrees who provide training and support for public library directors, for trustees, for library staff at the state's 187 independently operating public libraries on topics that range from cataloging, youth services, library management, board governance, accessibility, public programming, and technology. So we do that. The consultation service is really done through convening meetings, communicating, and also doing a number of continuing education programs for staff. Since our state doesn't have a Master's of Library Science program in the state, we have a largely non-professional set of staff in public libraries throughout the state. About 85% of the staff in Vermont don't have a master's, and so we provide training to them to support excellence at public libraries throughout the state. We also, you'll see in our budget that there's a $90,000 appropriation, which is for the Community Legal Information Program at the the Vermont Law School, so the CLIC program. And so through that grant, we provide Vermonters with access to legal resources and to a full-time law librarian. And we support statewide summer reading throughout the state. And we also award grants to public libraries for summer programming each year. In addition to all of that regular work, we're also currently administering 2 one-time federal grant programs to support capital improvements in public libraries. Last fall, we made sub-awards from the U.S. Treasury's Capital Projects Fund to 14 public libraries in support of projects that will increase and maintain access to high-speed internet for the purposes of work, telehealth, and education. And later this calendar year, we plan to subaward $10 million in funding from Housing and Urban Development to repair small rural libraries, kind of doing essential repairs to keep them operating. Because
that's this year's,
we plan to do that by the end of this calendar year, in December.
Okay, but that money isn't in your budget, or at least on the sheet I'm looking at, that $10 million.
That is.
So you have federal funds, 1.2.
Mm-hmm. The capital projects funds are in another budget line, I think, because of ARPA.
Okay.
Sometimes they're set up differently.
Right, so it's in one tax, right?
Yeah. Thank you. So I think we can probably jump into the budget conversation now. And if you turn to page 15, you'll see a high-level overview of the department's budget.
So 15.
Is it in the PDF that you should have?
Okay.
And at a high level, the general funds that we're requesting make up about 61% of our regular budget, and the federal funds from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, or IMLS, make up about 33%. Something to just make note of is that the federal funding for the federal funding that we would spend in state fiscal year 2026 is not the actual award amount at this time, so that could change. It's an approximation. And for reference, our most recent grants to states allocation in 2024 was $1,244,357. And that allotment is formula driven, but we've been good stewards. Jeanette Schaefer, who I introduced earlier, is our LSTA coordinator, and there's no reason that they would give us less than the allotted amount for our state once that amount is known. So we're hopeful that that funding will be continued. And I'm happy to answer any of the questions that you may have about the budget documents in front of you. And I know that if I can't answer any questions that are technical, we have folks here who can support. you in finding that information.
Are those one time in this document?
The two one-time capital funds are not in this document. Those two allocations are not in this document. So what's shown here is the general fund request, the anticipated IMLS federal allocation, and a small amount of special funds that we receive that are earmarked for certain things, such as youth services. We typically use those to grant out funds to libraries throughout the state to offset some of the costs of our youth services consultant and other youth-focused programming.
And that's the state fund.
That's the Smith Fund. If you look at the graph on page 4 of the budget book, the let's see. The general fund is the orange. I think the SF, the gray, is the Smith Fund. So it's a very small percentage, 3% of our budget typically.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at for the governor's budget book.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Because that has that $96,000 of special state funds. Right.
What page on their budget book? Sorry, I didn't missed it.
I think that a good page for you all to look at is page 15, which has the columns that show the general fund, special funds. So that special fund would be both the Smith Fund and any other special funds that we have remaining. We have had over the years a couple of funds that have been dedicated for certain things that we've been spending down to keep our budget level. But they're all relatively small amounts. And then you'll also see this interdepartmental transfers, which is a little bit confusing because we don't actually touch that money. That's money that comes from other departments and agencies. They each pay per seat for access to the Westlaw database, which is the legal reference source that they have. That arrangement was made years ago when.
Sarah Watson?
Sorry, I think you're referring to page 15 in the document that you have, the PDF online as opposed to this book.
Yeah, not the governor.
It's not.
It's on online.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure that I'm.
Both of them.
Okay. Seems to make sense. This vacancy savings, that's just a normal amount?
That's the normal amount. We do see that annually we typically have some positions open at some point. So we try to use the standard estimate of vacancy savings based on past year's projections.
Did you hit the 3%? So one thing that we don't see on these is the change from last year.
I believe that for the general fund, we're actually requesting more than the 3%, and that's because our federal funds don't necessarily increase at that rate of 3%. In fact, some years they may go down, and so there is a little bit of an unknown here for the federal fund, but the governor's budget includes more than a 3% increase for us, because what we've been trying to do is to really align the federal funding spend with there's a 2-year period of performance, but we try to align it with one state fiscal year so that we have a really good handle on how much things actually cost. And we've been working very hard to stay within our means because we know that that's important to Vermonters to be affordable.
And so in the detail report, we see that percentage. Is there a total? Or is it all only broken up by the sections? Like you get a percentage by line, then you get a percentage by kind of subsection? Does it roll up at the bottom and say total percent increase?
Roll up on page 20.
20?
Yeah. You'll see the percent change for each fundings.
For all. I see. Well, for this, it's overall, it's a negative 2.2%.
Yeah.
And that's your overall budget is actually going down 0.2%, even though you need that increase for general funds, as you said.
Yeah, one thing that had been taking place previously is that the department's budget was, because there was a 2-year spend for the federal funds, the spend trend was sometimes not as consistent. And what we're trying to do here is to really capture what the costs are for 1 year. And so there's a truing up that needs to happen there. If you looked at the past year's budget, you would see that the amount that was requested to have permission to have the authority to spend of the federal funds exceeded the actual allocation from IMLS, the federal funder. So we've tried to align it more closely, but it is very difficult to project exactly. And I do want to share that if there were a change in the funding at the federal level, this is one of the areas that would need to be looked at because a third of our budget is from that federal source.
And have you heard any inkling, or other than just all federal funds seem to be the question these days, but do you have any information specifically about library funds?
We do not yet have specific information. The IMLS Grants to States program, which is our source of federal funding, our primary source, is that was on the list of frozen funds. And so we do know that that's something that's been being looked at. We are just kind of in a holding pattern, waiting to see. They were we don't actually have a firm grasp of our allocation. Usually we would know by now what the allocation for the current year and future years were, but there's been some delay in telling us the allocation. I expect we would know more by April, which is not necessarily in time for this.
Sure. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Well, thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's nice to see you all.
Yeah. So the Attorney General is in the waiting room. So we can move on to our next agenda item, which is budget adjustment request from the Attorney General. So, change of gears here. Thanks for joining us, Attorney General Clark.
I can't figure out. I need you to go.
Seems like it was quiet. Okay.
There she is.
Hello.
Hey everyone. It is a snow day in Williston.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry that I'm not only not there, but I'm juggling a lot. So forgive me.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see you all, although I always prefer to testify in person. So I'm sorry that I'm not there. And I want to take a moment and introduce Marcy Hodgson, who is she's the CFO of our office. That's not her actual title, but that really covers it. So she's our whiz with all of this. And we wanted to talk to you about 2 positions that we're asking for in the BAA. Should I just dive right into those?
Yeah.
Okay. The first relates to Act 180, which is the big restorative justice bill from last year. You'll recall that bill was passed out of the House and Senate. The governor vetoed that bill. He provided one reason for the veto, and the reason was that in his opinion, I needed resources in order to implement that bill in last year's budget. I did not, and responded accordingly. I wrote a letter to let you know that was not a barrier at that time, but that we would need someone this year. So here we are. on Act 180, needing that position to now be created so that we can stand up the program. And as a refresher, this was a program called Precharge that, like with all of our restorative justice type programming, pretrial services, court diversion, is very effective at relieving tension and economic pressures really on the judiciary by sending people with the lower level crimes or lower level offenses into programming that can address the harms in a way that rehabilitates and can be effective. And we have great results in that programming, and we have a ton of experience. My office has been overseeing that programming for decades. We have great relationships in the communities with the programs we kind of fund and collaborate with on this work. And so for years, we had thought it made sense to move the Precharge program under our umbrella from the Department of Corrections where it had been located. And you might be asking yourself, well, hang on, if the Department of Corrections had the program, they had the money, why don't we just bring the money from the Department of Corrections to your office? I had the same question. The answer from the administration, who probably can speak to this better than I can, is that person or people who were doing this work, it wasn't like a standalone program that they could just slice off and move the program monies to us. It was more complicated than that, and they couldn't just remove the monies and bring it to us because that person or people were doing multiple roles. So that is where we got where we are. So I'm happy to answer questions, but I feel like that's probably not a surprise because we went through it last year, that here we are needing that position. I should note that at this point in time, we have the funding, we just need the position created. So, and Marcy can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but that is the long and short of where we are with that. We are okay with the money. We just need the position to be created at this point so we can get it filled and start to stand up that program. I should emphasize something because you obviously have a diversity of geography and where you represent. The Precharge program was not available in all counties. With Act 180, it now will be available to all counties, and that diversity of geographic justice, if you will, I think is really critical. So just wanted to point that out to you all. But happy to answer questions on this one before I move on to our second ask for the BAA.
And this I'm pretty sure was in the House bills passed, this position. So for the full year, it's 119, but you're just asking for whatever the difference is, or is the 119 what you're asking for in the BAA?
On the BAA, we're just asking for the position. The money will be for the big bill.
Okay, but you want to be able to advertise and hire it, but you won't actually spend the money till July.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any questions about this position? As I said, the House did put this in, so we'll see that when it comes over to that. Okay.
Hey, shall I move on to position number 2?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So this is a position for an attorney in the unit we call our appellate unit. The appellate unit is made up of 1 paralegal and 2 lawyers. The lawyers are the Solicitor General for the state of Vermont and the Deputy Solicitor General for the state of Vermont. These are unusually fancy titles. I think every state that I know of has these positions. They are Assistant Attorneys General who are kind of the experts, legal experts among legal experts, if you will. They are often coming from judicial clerkships. We recently, last year, we had one of our former Solicitor Generals got promoted to the bench, and now he's a judge. These are very high functioning, very intelligent and expert people in what they do, especially issues like constitutional law. And for that reason, they not only handle appeals for the state and help other lawyers in the state when they have an appeal, but they also do work on the trial level that's not on the appeals level when it comes to more complicated, legally complicated topics, such as the Constitution. And they are experts in, the evolving court cases from in the constitutional context and all the rest of it. The reason why we need this position now, there's two reasons. Together, they sort of put us over the edge. The first reason is over the past, short number of years, maybe 3 or 4 years, we have a lot more legally novel cases we're handling related to legislation, which we vigorously supported. But we do find ourselves spending more time on cases that are focused on defending legislation related to the environment, reproductive rights, and guns, other topics that involve some complications in terms of novel legal theories that require our appellate unit to be involved with handling those. So that is reason number one. And reason number two that brought us to this point is that we have anticipated and seen a tremendous increase in the work that unit does due to the actions by our new president, who has taken truly unprecedented steps to implement policies that are unconstitutional and illegal. We have, in 2 weeks, we've already sued twice and won twice. The first lawsuit related to the birthright citizenship executive order that a federal judge in Washington, who had been appointed by Ronald Reagan, said was the most unconstitutional thing he'd seen in his 40 years on the federal bench. And then he questioned how a lawyer who was admitted to the bar could even say that it was constitutional. So as egregious and obvious as that example was, it still required a ton of work to get that filed. I mean, people literally working through the night. I'm communicating with my team at 6 a.m. when I wake up. That's sometimes the first people I'm saying hi to on text is them. They are working with their counterparts in other states on certain matters. And then last week we had to sue related to the freeze on federal funding, which has made a huge impact here in Vermont, as I'm sure you're hearing from your constituents, as I have as well. And that involves a ton of work. Just to kind of frame it a little bit, for Vermont to get involved in these lawsuits while we're working with other states, and that is a huge relief on the amount of work that we have to do. We don't have to write all of every single brief. Even if we're not the ones taking lead, we still have to provide an anchor to make sure that we establish that Vermont has standing. We are an appropriate party for the lawsuit. And that requires us to work with state government, work with nonprofits, work with the treasurer's office or whoever it is, so that we can get declarations like sworn statement saying, hey, here's the facts in Vermont. This is why we're suing. In addition to making sure that, our view of the law is in accordance with what's ever happening in another state who might be taking lead on that issue. And based on our review of the executive orders and some of the other actions that this new administration has taken, we anticipate this is just the beginning. And we are going to continue to have this intense pace where we are working every night and every weekend on these issues. I also want to add, and I'm sure you're getting the same thing, but I have, even watching as I have and reading the newspapers with alarm, even I have been surprised by the overwhelming support and constituent correspondence that I have received in my official capacity, in my sort of personal capacity, friends texting me. And then even my campaign email has been flooded with people who are sending supportive messages. And I'm going to predict that by the end of this month, I will have received more constituent correspondence relating to our good work that, let's be specific, this appellate unit, these 2 lawyers and 1 paralegal are doing. All of that correspondence from Trump's beginning on January 20th to the end of this month, I bet will be equal or larger than all of the correspondence total on every issue I received during my first term. That is how much support and thanks we're receiving for this work. So, if we want to deliver for our constituents, and we want to know what's important to them. I can tell you this is absolutely important to them. And we're getting that kind of positive feedback in spades. It feels good. I always pass it on to my team who's working so hard, but we truly are overwhelmed. And I don't see this stopping anytime soon because it's a new thing every day. And in addition, of course, lawsuits take a long, long time. So once we get started with these, it's not like it goes away. In fact, we still had some lawsuits left over from Trump 1. So they take a long time, and we need the lawyers to be there to be able to do the work and do it well.
Great, thank you, that's helpful. And for the committee, if you didn't see it, on our committee page is a PowerPoint, basically slides that go over what the Attorney General just explained, if you wanted to see that in some of the bullet points, but she covered all those. Do we have any questions with the Attorney General? Yes, Senator Norris.
Yes, thank you, AG Clark. I don't see, where do I find the actual monies, the cost for these two positions? I see you have the monies for the first
top of
position.
slide, I think it's slide 3 at the top where it says, well, there's no money for the first position. The second position, it says 1 permanent exempt position and $50,000. That would be 3 months salary and benefits plus a fit up. That's just for the BAA. If you are curious about the amount we will be asking for and for the FY26, it's $181,800,000 for, and this would be like a 3 to 5 year associate. So associate, as you can tell, I come from private practice. This would be a junior lawyer who has a couple years of experience, but not a lot. And I'll tell you, it's a very prestigious role to be in the Solicitor General's office. So we're feeling optimistic about being able to secure someone quickly and to get the help that we need.
But it's important for the committee to know that when we get these kind of requests, $50,000, it seems like, okay, 50,000, but we're really basically committing to 180 some plus increases, for the foreseeable future. So it's something to remember. You can't look at it as just $50,000, but it's $50,000 now, and it's going to increase the base cost.
Yep.
Going forward.
Can I mention something I neglected, but I'm anticipating a question you might have is, oh, hey, Charity, didn't we do this before in 2017? Like, why now? And I just wanted to address that a little bit. In 2017, we also saw a lot of this, and we joined a lot of lawsuits, but the focus was more what we would call like the culture war stuff, which was less complicated and easier to handle. It still was no picnic, but now we're seeing the threat to funding, the dismantling of the federal government. We're seeing like much more intense, dramatic, and complicated topics that are requiring a different kind of attention and are time intensive in a different way from what we saw the first go round. Also, I would say, Trump has already been president for 4 years. So he has learned a lot, and therefore he's moving more quickly with a lot more intensity based on what he learned and the different people he's chosen to surround himself with. So it's been, and I'll just acknowledge, it's very disappointing, that we are having to do this work at all. Especially when you're hearing from a Reagan appointed judge that this is like grossly unconstitutional, but it is what it is. We didn't pick this moment to be in the Attorney General's office, but here we are having to meet this moment on behalf of Vermonters.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, looks like you can get back to your snow day.
Thank you. I have hot chocolate to make.
We appreciate your time, and thanks, Marcy, also for being with us. But if we know how to reach you if we have any other questions.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, next on our agenda is Department of Tax. Commissioner?
Where do you want us to plug in a computer for the presentation?
Maybe we don't want you to plug.
That's how late.
Yeah, right.
Right, yeah.
We can be done in 90 seconds if you'd like.
No, I don't, sorry. Oh, right here?
That's a good thought.
So
do you not have a plug?
No.
I don't have one either.
Oh, you don't have a way to plug us in?
No.
Could we
Yeah,
hop onto
Zoom.
the Zoom and screen share?
Yeah, that's what we have.
That's what we have. Yeah, the house has cords directly to the screen, but we don't have that in the Senate.
Very fancy.
We're more advanced.
You think someone would
Do
address
we
that?
have Wi-Fi here, or should I hotspot this?
Yeah, you should be able to access the state Wi-Fi.
We will.
Well, cool. As he's getting that set up, I'm happy to start talking.
Yeah, are these your last remaining hours as commissioner? Like, how much more time do we have?
Well, yes, Craig Bolio, tax commissioner for now. Yeah, no, through next week I'll be here. Next Friday will be my last day in the office.
Can I ask, did I miss an announcement of interim or?
You did not.
Okay.
Announcement. Our deputy commissioner will be interim if there's not another appointment made.
I see.
From the country. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and I'm with Andrew Stein, our COO, and then Holly Ferrant is also here, the AOA CFO, to walk through this. And I'm just going to talk for a few minutes, sort of high level about what we're about and how I see us over at the tax department. Headline is, I think we're awesome. There's a really solid team over there doing a bunch of really incredible work at a very high service level with a lot of passion, a lot of belief in having a healthy organizational culture, a lot of perspective of let's help people however we can with, the sometimes complicated, often complicated, sometimes scary, always necessary world of taxes. We meet our service metrics. We have a strong organizational culture. I think a lot of the success that we've been able to have over the last decade has been a tremendous amount of respect from the governor's office and also the legislature and this committee and the appropriations committee in the House of being willing and able to fund the budgets that we've presented. That's really allowed us to have the resources that we need. And I think that, we try to do our part of our responsibility of making sure that we're not squandering the resources that we're given and making sure that we're not asking for things that we don't need. But I think that we've found a really great balance to be able to do that. And I think that the department is really at a spot that it's thriving. I usually start by just going over our mission, goals, and values, and perfect timing for that. So what do we do, right? What's our job at the tax department, right? So our mission is to serve Vermonters by administering our tax laws fairly and efficiently to help taxpayers understand and comply with their state tax obligations, right? For better or worse, the bedrock of the U.S. tax system is voluntary compliance, right? And so it's important that we are there with a service-oriented approach, an educational-focused approach, making sure that we're also there for the folks that are not coming in voluntarily to help entice, or in the absolute worst-case scenarios, coerce when we need to. But we have three main organizational goals, right? The first is to be a model of service-oriented tax administration. What I mean by that is I want us to be a national leader on tax and revenue agencies taking a service-oriented approach. It might sound kind of crazy because of how small we are, derived from our population, but let me give you a really tangible example of how we're executing on that. In the height of tax season, our phone call wait times for our taxpayer services department, which is the area that most folks have to call if you have a question about taxes, in the middle of April peaks out at what, 4 or 5 minutes?
Well, that's 3 to 4.
Yeah, 3 to 4 minutes. When we are talking to our colleagues around the country and we say that our wait times in April are 3 to 4 minutes, they don't believe us. They don't think that's possible, right? But we, the small, mighty department that could, are able to do that, right? I think we're the second smallest tax or revenue agency in the country. New Hampshire is smaller, but they don't have personal income tax or sales tax to administer, right? So we have really found a way to do a lot with what we have, and I'm really proud of that work. The second is to reduce the tax gap, right? That's the difference between what should have been filed and paid and what actually was. The federal government estimates the tax gap sometimes every year, so every couple of years. I think the latest estimates from them is that even after all of the compliance activity from the IRS, the federal tax gap is about 16 cents on the dollar. So for every...
And it says here on your slide, from 2011, 2015, so it's like 10 years ago.
Okay, yeah, so that was older. There's probably an updated one that we could, 86 cents, I got you. Yeah, 14 cents on the dollar that should have been paid that wasn't. At the federal level, that is $500 billion, right? If you scale that to our general fund, several hundred million, right?
We don't ever do this for Vermont.
We've not estimated it for Vermont. It's a as you can imagine, a very involved process. I would say, it's probably a reasonable estimation for what a state tax cap is as well, because so many of our taxes, particularly income taxes, feed off of the federal. We have some state level taxes like sales tax, meals tax, things like that the feds don't have, but they've got some stuff we don't have as well. So that's a lot of money, right? And that's a way that we could provide more revenue to the state for more services to Vermonters without having to raise people's taxes. So that's a foundational job of any revenue agency. And then promote a healthy organizational culture that helps our employees thrive, right? I can say, as the leader of an organization, I feel a great deal of responsibility from the human side of this. If we're going to have people work for an organization that they're going to be spending a third of their lives at, I want to make sure that it is fulfilling, engaging, enjoyable, fun. Not every day is a slam dunk, but we can make it an engaging and fun community so that it is an enjoyable place to work. And we know that when people are happier, they do better work as well and more, right? I don't do my best work when I don't like where I'm working or I'm unhappy. And so we really try to focus on all of those things to make sure that we've got a healthy culture. That's been a journey we've been on for, I've only been in my role as commissioner for 5 years, a little over 5 years, but I really say that's been sort of a 10-year journey for us that we've really tried to focus on this. And the results have been really positive. And that's the result of folks at all different levels of the organization buying into that, because we've all got a role to play. I'm just one guy who's built that up.
We've got more to come on that later in the presentation.
Cool. And so then we move to our 4 core values, right? Service, integrity, growth, and community. Service, self-explanatory, right? Again, we talked about taking a service-oriented approach, helps enhance voluntary compliance, increases revenue, enhances our perception in the community. Integrity, if with the voluntary compliance system, if we're asking taxpayers to do the right thing, we damn well better be doing the right thing ourselves, right? Even when nobody's watching, right? Holding ourselves accountable, taking our confidentiality provisions really seriously, admitting when we make a mistake, making sure we're collecting the right amount of tax and not trying to maximize revenue. Growth, which is not necessarily growth of revenue, it's really growth of the way that we add value to Vermonters, right? There's a lot of things happening in society. The tax policy is not driving, but it interacts with tax policy, right? You can cryptocurrency, gig economy, hybrid work, all of these kind of things impact the way that we administer taxes. Even just the digitization of services, right? 20 years ago, 10% of people filed electronically. Now it's over 90%, right? So we've got to make sure that we're meeting people where they are in terms of these services and how customers would demand to interact with our department. And also, growth of the ability for folks to see a fulfilling and long and valuable career with the tax department, right? I know I met with you folks, I think last week or the week before, and I mentioned that I started at the department as a temporary employee, right? We like to be able to ensure that folks see a path for growth at the department and that they can continue to learn things, because for us to be able to do our jobs and do it well, we need to have the most talented workforce possible. Again, taxes are complicated. We need folks who have that kind of institutional knowledge and expertise to believe that they can have a valuable career at the tax department so that we can maximize our service outcomes. And community is our last core value. I think it's sort of all encompassing of the others. We have the broadest constituency in all of state government, right? Everybody has to pay taxes, all different backgrounds, walks of life, cultures, language. And we've got to be ready to provide the highest level of service for them. And it's also about internal community, right? Talking about our own culture and making sure that folks are enjoying where they're at and that people feel comfortable asking for and receiving help and supporting each other and having a good time when we can while taking the work really seriously. So that's sort of an overview of where we are. I think, when it comes to these kind of projects, we use this framework of core values and our goals a lot in decision making. They're not just words on a page that we look at. And I would say, my assessment of where we're at is we are very successful on executing on these things that we want to be, and these are jobs that never end, right? There's no point when you're talking about a healthy organizational culture where you're like, okay, we made it, we're done, right? You're always trying to make improvements there, and we're not perfect. So we're just making sure that we're turning in the right direction and applying resources and attention where we need to continue to make those kind of improvements.
The Department of Motor Vehicles also says they have the broadest reach or connection with Vermont, that everybody needs to get a license or buys a vehicle.
Respectfully, I think they're wrong. But perhaps there would be some data to show who's really on the top here.
All right, we'll get into that.
I will say, they have a very broad constituency in state government.
Yeah.
Perhaps the second broadest constituency in state government.
I'll bring that up in transportation.
I'm happy to take any questions on what I just discussed. Otherwise, I'd hand it over to my COO, Andrew, to get into the ups and downs, really the meat and potatoes of the budget for this year.
All right. So we only have about 20 minutes here, so I'm gonna be pacey, if you will.
Good.
And so we have about a $37.2 million budget this year for operating budget. 57% salaries and benefits, 32% IT. So about 90% of our budget is people and IT. And we believe that when you pair talented people with strong modern IT systems, you can get a lot done in the public service sector. And we have a lot of data to support that. Rent and building services, other expenses, miscellaneous expenses, postage and printing, which is much lesser portion of our budget than it was 10, 20 years ago. And internal services, things like the single audit revolving fund, our payments division, those types of things fall into that remaining 11%. We put our ADS expenses under IT, just so you know, in terms of how we break this out here. Current initiatives that we're working on, what our current budget and this budget is going to be working towards. The child care contribution is a new policy that we implemented this year, and it's a new tax type, it's a new assessment. There's been a lot of education in this space. It's going well. There was a bit more non-compliance than we had anticipated in the first quarter, but we were able to identify that very quickly and work with taxpayers to come into compliance. Broad outreach campaign around that. New local option tax towns as well. There's a number of those. We want to maintain our historically high processing efficiency this tax season, and we'll talk about how we measure that in a slide or two. We're in the process at the outset of modernizing current use. Current use, over half of the land in the state is enrolled in the current use program. And that program is still primarily a paper-based program. It's the last of the programs that this department administers that is paper-based. And so we really want to bring that into the 21st century this year. Complete and transition the Vermont Property Information Exchange. That's the new statewide property tax system. We
You
just
call it the Vermont Pie, though?
BT Pie, that's right. Not quite as tasty as apple pie, but implement a new scanning system. That's been huge for us. Our scanning system is quite dated, and while that's a dwindling business need, receiving paper and digitizing it, we view it as a business need for the next couple of decades. We want to meet taxpayers where they are. And we're already seeing a ton of huge gains there. With some recent retirements on that team, we're able to reclassify some positions for some other high need areas that we have. We're wanting to build on our recruitment success. We've done a good job in the past few years of keeping that vacancy rate under 10%. Right now it's about 10%. Most of that is in one division of our department that's particularly difficult to recruit for, our compliance division. Outside of our compliance division, we have 4 vacancies across the entire department, and we have 167 FTEs. So we're feeling pretty good about that. We want to continue process improvements on forms and our VTAX system, and we want to further operationalize our organizational values.
Can you remind me on the local option tax, what percentage the tax department gets to administer that?
We have a fee that's applied.
Just like
it's per form, per municipality.
Per form?
Yeah, so
form?
each time a return is filed. And it's $5.96, I believe.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
By each business that's collecting.
That's right.
Yes. So business A is paying the local option tax for Montpelier, for example. It would be $5.96 for that. If they're doing it for 2 municipalities, it would be $5.96 times 2.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And then, of course, 30% goes to the pilot, and then
I just couldn't remember if you got a percentage or you just.
it's a flat fee.
It's a flat fee, okay.
Yeah. And so this is a high-level summary of our ups and downs, which you'll see on our ups and downs. The ups and downs sheet, I think, for us this year can be a little bit confusing because we realigned some budget items to match how we were expending funds so that we can track them better. So maybe I should just go to the next slide. Actually, I can come back to this if you all want. I broke this out so you could see where the real ups and downs were by category, and nearly all of it's in salary and benefits. And most of that is routine, things that are outside of our control, various, health insurance, retirement, those types of things. We have a slight reduction in IT expenses. And the other ones are minor ups and downs, internal services. Some of the internal service funds have gone up a bit. Salaries and benefits, the one thing I should mention, I'm gonna go back to this slide. We are looking at a class action RFR this summer for our tax examiner and field auditor positions. That's 10 positions total. We don't see it as triggering the legislative review, where it's, I forget exactly what the threshold is. Jason's familiar with it, but we took a look at this and we don't think it'll trigger legislative review. I don't know the exact number of positions here. I want to say somewhere between 50 and 70. So across, we wanted to budget, and we have a maximum estimate of what we think the impact to our budget will be, and we were able to meet the administrative targets for our budget while having this class action RFR in there. And these are positions that really haven't been updated in a while, and our department has shifted a lot over the course of the past 10 years, become a lot more modern. So the functions of some of these positions, the union reached out to us last summer and brought up with us about one of the positions that it was right for review. And
Senator Watson.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what an RFR is.
Request for reclassification. So that's when you look at a position and you say, is the classification accurate or not?
So like contractor versus?
It's for each position in state government has a classification.
Okay.
Each classified position. So I'm an exempt position, Craig's an exempt position,
Right.
but non-management employees are typically classified.
We're gonna talk about that when we have the Department of Human Resources. We're gonna talk about classification.
Great,
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
And so, but I didn't know that there was a trigger for legislative.
There is, if the change is above, Amy would be. Is it 1% of the total budget for one position?
Salaries and benefits.
Yeah, of salaries and benefits.
Oh, 1% of your, so all taxes, if the reclass got you over 1%.
Yeah, for a given position. And this covers 10 positions here, 10 separate positions, this number, so. Yeah, we don't see that happening. However, I wanted to just flag that. I know performance was something that, in the memo that you sent to departments and agencies, Andy.
Yeah.
Good
job referencing the letter. You got extra time.
Yeah. So first I'm gonna put a spotlight on service here. We have some more slides based on our performance budget, but I thought putting the summary, the main things front and center would be helpful for y'all here. So our refund goal was achieved. So for the third straight year, the department met our key performance goal of issuing 95% of timely requested personal income tax refunds by June 1. So that's within 45 days. And that's a target that a lot of states use. And this number of 95%, when I first started at the department, people scoffed that it was an impossible mark to hit. And I remember about, 8 years ago when Craig was the director of the BTAX project, that's our IT system, and I was an economist and an analyst and working with him and our deputy on a way to track refunds, that folks scoffed at the idea that we could even get above 90%. At that time, we were well below 90%. So this year we hit our highest ever mark of 97% of refunds issued by that date. And that's a big deal. If you think about child tax credit, earned income tax credit, all of these refundable tax credits, or a lot of people over withhold, right? And they're owed money from the state. The sooner we get that money back into their pockets, the sooner they're spending that money in our communities, the sooner they're able to provide for their families in different ways. We take that very seriously. So
we assume electronic filing helps a lot.
Huge. Yeah, if you look at
Tell your friends.
if you look at, I have this great graph. 20 years ago, the number of returns that we received that were electronic was below 10%, and today it's well above 90%. Renter credit progress in 2018, 25% of claims were issued within 60 days. Last year, 96% of renter credit claims were issued within 60 days. That's a big gain.
That's a program I talked to you folks about last time I was here as well. It's a great story of how we've reformed something really successfully. A big part of that reform was, hey, we think we can get more money to more people while making it easier to file and easier to process. And that is a big part of the story that you see here, that 25% in 2018. A big part of that was the number of challenging filings we got from folks that took a more thorough review, but also the challenges that we had in getting those things out the door efficiently. And you can see the success of that reform program, that money's getting out the door a lot faster. Very proud of that.
Homestead declaration goal, we completed processing of timely filed homesteads 2 weeks ahead of the end of June deadline, which is a big deal. My first year in this role, we really struggled to hit that deadline, and there was a situation, I think the year before you became a commissioner, where we kind of missed that deadline, and that created a lot of headaches for municipalities. So we're pleased to see that again. Short wait times, the department received 106,000 calls in 2024, and the average taxpayer waited 1 minute and 23 seconds before talking to an agent.
Do you have a performance goal for wait times?
So typically it's below 3 minutes, but yeah, we're well below.
And is 106 calls normal for the last few years? Or?
It's a good question. I have
Yeah, 106,000.
It's a lot objectively.
I don't know how many DMV gets.
It's been, well, I think they get more in the door, right? But it's been trending downwards over the years.
It trended down, but it kind of has leveled off in recent years because of when we were issuing federal grants, we got a lot of calls. And in the past several years, we've rolled out a number of big programs. So,
or like, UI gets made fun of by their wait times, but I don't know if that's because they had 700,000 calls or
it's a good question.
The complexity that they were having, because people were waiting tens of minutes there, or hours.
The number of calls that we received did really plummet though after the implementation of P-tax, because people were able to self-service.
Right.
Personal income tax still isn't in that space yet. So in terms of 2024 implementations, child care contribution, chatted about that briefly, big outreach campaign there. That was a big push. Corporate and business income tax reform, we implemented a major policy overhaul to the corporate income tax code and updated the business income tax forms. New scanning system, we implemented phase 1 of the department's new scanning system, and we just completed phase 2 a couple of weeks ago. And that's bringing about a lot of different efficiencies for digitizing, depositing, reviewing paper returns and checks. And then a new phone system. We rolled out a new phone system this summer with enhanced capabilities to improve service. And we're looking forward to using those in the next year or so. We'd like to have a survey, for example, to gather information from taxpayers who were helped about how we're doing. That wasn't something that was easily done before. And this can also dovetail in with our tax system so that we can track how we're doing with phone calls in ways we couldn't before. So I also want to put a spotlight here on employee engagement. And I only have 5 minutes, so I want to do that and then open it up.
What's the net promoter score?
So the it's funny that you asked that. I actually left myself a note on here. It's essentially how likely is somebody to promote your department or agency.
Like if I work there and say like, you should work here.
Yeah, I have a description of it because I'm like, I know somebody's going to ask me about that.
I think they put all the results into an algorithm, right? And then they put you into one of 3 categories: promoter, neutral, or detractor. And so this is essentially a metric of how many more promoters than detractors do you have?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a way of gauging how likely it is that you would recommend the state of Vermont as a place to work, and they break it down by departments. In our case, if we were to break it down, the 3 components is 48% would recommend it, 35% are neutral, 17 would not recommend it. So the statewide promoter score is 9.2. We were 30.8. I think that was top 5, if I'm not mistaken.
I think just out of top 5, but
yeah,
it's high.
Okay.
Where did DMV come in?
Yeah, I know, we gotta check with DMV.
I'm not trying to dunk on them in every
This is
I like that.
really
Well,
competitive.
there's this dashboard. We could do that. So 98% of employees believe the work they perform is linked to the department meeting its goals and mission, which is a big deal. 92% of employees say their colleagues are committed to doing good work. 86% of employees say they enjoy the day-to-day of their jobs. We were ahead of the state average on 68 or 72 questions. We improved on 87% of repeat questions from 2023 to 2024. And then we have that net promoter score, which I have to imagine we're well above the MB, but we'll have to look.
Be kind. The journey that I like to tell there is, if you looked at our results in 2014, they don't ask the questions always in the same way, but in 2014, our score for the question of morale is good in my department was about 32%. That's not good. The way it's asked today is the culture in my department is a healthy one. And you have it on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, look at that. We didn't plan that. Almost 80%, right? So that's really telling that story of what's happened over the past 10 years for us, of everybody really taking this seriously, working together on this, people at all levels of the organization, caring about this and recognizing the part that they have to play. And the results are really positive. I love the second one too, recommending it as a good place to work, almost 90% on that. I'm proud of that.
How many people in your department?
167 FTEs. We have a number of temps. We have our agency of digital services team. We also have a contractor, Fast Enterprises, that regularly has about 11 to 20 people on site with us. So I say it's a 200-person operation.
Mm-hmm. And you're all still in, was that 111?
133.
133.
Yeah, right next door.
Yeah, except for the basement, I assume.
Yes, we're not
No one's going in there.
Yeah.
Still.
Floodplain. Yeah. Okay, so probably should move to the ups and downs.
Well, I had the ups and downs before. Do you want? We have 2 minutes, so whatever you want me to touch on.
So you have that slide 7. You don't have anything.
I can go back up there.
I just didn't know if you had the other.
We have.
I guess you had, like
the
on
more
slide
detailed
18, is that all the details?
Yeah. Yeah, so this isn't the summary, this is more of the details.
And unless there's anything in here, I guess you would have brought it up on the summary, but there's nothing in here that you want to bring our attention to in
Just
more details.
That class action RFR that we're anticipating is the only thing that's out of the typical year-to-year changes this year for us.
I'm still getting used to all these different reports.
Sure. And this one is particularly confusing this year because you'll see a number of ups, and then you'll also see,
so overall,
you'll also see a number of downs.
So the overall, you're at 5.5% increase. Is that right? If I look at your page 28, and so the governor said 3%.
We hit
5%.
So we hit the 3% target, but then a number of internal service funds come in and a number of other numbers come in. And when that happens, finance and management gives us extra money typically, and then they ask us to absorb it in other areas.
Right. Okay. Senator Norris?
Yes, thank you. Your class action RFR.
Yeah.
And this isn't meant to be funny.
Yeah.
Is DMV behind that?
No.
Okay.
They have nothing to do with it.
Because in another department.
Yeah.
Anyways, so
do they have a class action RFR coming down the
I'm not going to comment.
Well, I think the big impetus behind that, there's a career ladder for those positions as well. So we scale them 1 through 6, I think are the levels. And what we're finding, right, is as our needs change, as the workforce changes, particularly in the lower levels, we're not really recruiting at those lower levels anymore, right? So it's sort of squeezing us at the top in terms of our ability to recruit and the kind of folks that we can get. So we just want to do a reclassification there to recalibrate, essentially.
There's also a bunch of clerical responsibilities in those positions that those positions don't do anymore, and they have all sorts of digital responsibilities. For example, heading into tax season, there's a ton of programming that's done to automate the tax season. So there's all sorts of automation that occurs during the tax season, but leading up to it, it requires a lot of manual input and a lot of testing to make sure that everything's working well. And of course, you get into the season and you realize a thing here isn't working great or a thing there isn't working right, and we isolate those issues and we solve them very quickly, but we want to limit them as much as possible. And so there's a lot more upfront work required of these positions than there used to be, and it's a lot different, the type of work.
And Amy, just from your experience, was it a pretty regular thing that within the whole state government that there's going to be 1 or 2 departments agencies that are gonna be doing RFR on a
Or
regular
class
basis?
review, yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
We haven't done a class review since I've been in this role.
That's true.
Yeah, so like every year, there's gonna be some department or some agency that's
Typically, there's several. They do them, I think, July to the end of August, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. You can only do them one time a year.
Yeah.
Oh, but CBA, but contract. The rules are all around, the cost review and the 1%, it's all outlined in the contracts.
But the union contracts, yeah. This is all for the classified union. Okay. Any other questions for tax or anything else that you want to tell us or things we forgot to ask you?
And you and I are meeting on Monday.
Yeah, so
dig into this more. I'm happy to
look at any other
go through our
details.
budget workbook and answer any questions you have.
Okay. All right, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Looks like a good work. Yeah, is human resources
They're outside in the bus.
in the hallway?
Oh, perfect. I'll be able to answer later.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see if we can just move right on to them.
Yeah, I see it. It's been a while. Thanks a lot.
Too many questions. Okay. I think the smell's slowing down.
It should.
Yeah.
Can't see my.
Commissioner, yeah, if you want to sit down.
Already, and then I had a big fit, so.
You feeling good?
I'm not even, yeah, I don't even have, I'm not even sick, I don't have anything going, I just, that just happened, it's weird. Anyways,
All right, well, I assume Senator Brennan will be right back, but we have a quorum, so we'll continue. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the record. And do you know everybody here, or should we introduce ourselves? We can.
I know everybody, except for, who is? Hey,
Hi.
my name is Al. Hi, Al, I'm Beth. Beth Fastigi, the Commissioner of the Department of Human Resources. We're here today to talk about the DHR budget. You should have that, Holly would have sent that, to y'all, so you should have that, on whatever technology you use. And, we've got Holly Front and Harvey Waller and Jason Bernard and Harold Schwartz in the room, and I'm not sure, I think my deputy commissioner may be hopping on, but not sure. So we have a lot of people to answer a lot of questions that you may have. Just kind of starting out, our budget increase is actually a 9% increase in fiscal year 26. It is primarily because of personnel costs, salaries and benefits, and less reliance on vacancy savings, so more fully funding our positions. We've got 8 new positions 2 years ago, and this is kind of reflecting those being filled. We have 6 exempt staff and 104 classified. Big projects we've been working on, number 1 is the paid family medical leave insurance program, which is in 3 phases. The first phase was having paid family medical leave insurance for state employees, which was effective July 1st, 2023. And then last summer, it was open to businesses across Vermont. And then this summer, it will be open up to individuals. So we're busy implementing phase 3 on that, working with the Hartford, who is the vendor, getting ready to launch that. So individuals can buy that whose employers aren't offering it.
Do you have any information on how many businesses?
Currently about 52 have signed up.
Do you know how many employees that relates to, or?
I think it was in the 400 or 500 range last I looked. So it's really on average about 11 to 12 people, employees per business, so pretty small employers, yeah.
Little guys.
Yeah, which is why this is a good program, because normally they wouldn't be able
Yeah.
to afford it.
Exactly, yeah, so it seems to be, I think the Hartford is pretty pleased with the progress in the sales in the first year and the interest. We did a lot of information sessions across, you know, with chambers and business organizations to help people understand what the product was. And I think that while it launched July, the biggest uptake was kind of in the fall, so employees were launching the benefit for their employees January 1st. Yeah, so that's number one. The second big project we're working on is the Enterprise Resource Planning Project, which is the replacement of the VTHR system and the Vision system. So those projects, we just started the implementation. The VTHR system is going first, and that's about a 2-year implementation. So that is a separate appropriation that we have a couple of years ago, an AOA appropriation as well as a ADS appropriation. And then our final project that is in the fiscal year 26 budget is the $1.575 million appropriation for the classification compensation project, which our goal is to have a new classification system. And that's about a 2-year implementation, I would say, once we get a contract signed, we can get started. The vendors that bid said, 18 months to 2 years, but in reality, it's probably gonna take longer than that because we have to, along the way, we have to bargain certain things with our labor partners. So it may take a little longer to implement, but I'm excited that we finally have funding proposed to get this project off the ground. It's been something that we've been contemplating for a long time, hoping that, so.
And will it be, did you say it would be a contractor or contractor together with?
It's a consulting firm contract, so that will help us figure out what new classification system we're going to use and how that will equate to a compensation system. Our current system is called the Lilith system, and it's been in place since the 1980s. It's been beyond support for many years, and it's not the way any organizations or governments really do their classification anymore. There's a point system, and the way we do it is so intertwined with the collective bargaining agreements, and a few points matter either way, and that's really not the way modern classifications are done. They look across, like vertically within the organization as well as horizontally across, and it's a lot more comparison based. So we're hoping to move somehow in that direction.
So the consultant will maybe give you an idea, but then you got to work with the union, and then this will be tied into some future collective bargaining agreement.
Yes, and we started this project several years ago. I don't know, Canada.
Yeah, I think Amy said that was something started.
A long time ago. We made some really good strides and then had a bit of a pause, and I think we're, in a good place now to move forward on it. But
will it help with the RFR? So we were just talking to tax about their RFRs.
Right.
If we did this classification system, would we expect fewer RFRs needed?
Yes. One of our goals is to get the number of employee classifications. Now we have over 1,800 classifications. We want to at least 1,800, yes. We want to cut that in half, at least. And we have so many reclassifications because both employees as well as management uses it as a de facto compensation system. So to get compensation to where they feel is appropriate for the employees rather than working through, let's say, we have nurses, and nurses are paid a lot in this day and age, and it might be higher than what we would classify them. We have a market factor. So nurses get a 40% higher pay grade than the actual pay chart says based on our classification. So instead of addressing compensations issues in a compensation manner, we're trying to address them through our through our classification system. And
so they just give them another class, or they push them up instead.
They review we review the responsibilities, and And if the responsibilities have increased, and there's various components of there, but if this responsibilities increase and the points change so much, that would mean their job class would go up as well as their salary typically. Yep. So this kind of gets out of that model, but it's a type of model where they are so intertwined, and there really should be everything that's in we have everything in one bucket that should really be in 6 separate buckets. So we kind of need to decouple them, and also at the same time have an actual new system, because now we've been using the system forever. It's been unsupported for, at least 20 years, 40 years. The Willis system, and it's not, people think of a system and what it is. It's a tool. It's a piece of paper that is a guide on how do you rate jobs. It's not like a IT system like people might think. And it certainly takes time to learn, and there's a lot of expertise in determining how those jobs work. But we recently just we called in the law enforcement classifications because there was concern that different law enforcement, direct law enforcement jobs within different departments weren't even across departments, and people, in different departments will put in the class reviews at different times. And so that kind of may create an imbalance. And some of that's based on the department budget, but either the managers can submit the review, or else employees actually can submit their own review. So this hopefully will change that. We have actually looking at the statistics in the workforce report, which some of you are probably familiar with. I do have a copy for the committee there, but there is a section there on the cost of reclassification each year, and it is unpredictable. I mean, a department can predict it, but also if management submits the reclassification, and they can plan for it. I think you just heard from Commissioner Bolio that they are planning for reclasses of their employees, and they're preparing for it in their budget. But that can also be done without budget preparation if it's submitted by, if the employee is submitted, and if it's a large class, that can really have a big impact on the budget.
So will everybody, after this classification system is changed, everybody would have to be reclassified? So basically, every state employee will be reclassified.
Right, and
so this is going to take a long time. It's
going to take time. So you'll have to do. How are you going to do this? You have a system to do it. And then how does that equate to pay? And equating to pay is bargainable. And presumably we wouldn't have employees under the new system. We wouldn't want to have employees have their pay decrease. That's would be a bad precedent. No employees like to stick around if we're going to reduce their pay. But there would certainly likely be employees whose pay would go up. So other states that have implemented new systems, compensation systems, sometimes they're implemented over time, because depending on what the budgetary impact is, you might not be able to absorb that in 1 year. So, and anything related to compensation it is something that we need to bargain with the union. So, but we need to have a plan to have a foundation before we can even get to that step.
And would you say what we're doing with the consultant is the plans for the foundation, or building the foundation?
It's the whole thing. It's from soup to nuts.
So that you'll be able then to go into the compensation under the same contract.
Right. So the compensation is part of the contract. Okay. It's a multi-phased project.
And it's multi-year.
Multi-year, multi-phased. Yeah. So that will be our department's big ask for the year.
Yeah. And so you say that's what pushed you over. So the governor's request was 3% increase. Is that part of the reclassification expense one of the main reasons you went over that?
No, that $1.575 million is in the B section of the big bill. It's not. Right. It's not actually in our budget. Okay. And it's one-time general fund under government modernization.
Right.
Yep.
So the increase was just you said it was mainly personnel. But.
It's personnel, it's salary, it's primary salaries and expenses. And also we were carrying a pretty high level of vacancy savings to meet that in fiscal year 25. So we won't be carrying that high-level vacancy savings going forward, especially since we're working on the enterprise resource planning project. We just can't afford to have, if we can fill the job, we've got to fill the job. We can't afford to wait a month or two to meet that vacancy savings target.
Do you know where your vacancy is right now, like as a percentage?
It's generally under 5%. It's pretty low. I think I have 5 vacancies right now in various stages. Most of them are, they're just in that stage of recruitment. But we've generally been able to fill our positions in a relatively timely manner.
Well, thank you. I don't have any other questions. Anybody else?
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing on how the reclassification goes.
Yeah, well, Senator Kitchell, I'm sure, will be very
Yeah, she used to
interested.
talk about that. I remember when we started the Willis.
Yeah, I think her quote before she left was, "I hope we get a new system in before I die."
Yeah.
Something like that. So we all obviously hope that as well, and hope she lives, hope well before that, well before that. But I feel like we're finally in a good position to be moving forward with that, and I'm really appreciative that funding is in the governor's budget. So I'm hoping the committee supports that.
And don't think you're going to steal Amy back to work on it.
Well, you never know. You never know, maybe we, I haven't made an offer yet. She knows the door is always open, so treat her well.
Well, appreciate the information and the time.
All right.
So for the committee, we'll take a 10-minute break.